Hey, and welcome back to the channel. Now if you're watching this channel, I'm fairly certain you like games. Why else would you be watching it? You probably grew up playing older games like I did. I started playing games in the 80s. And what an adventure it's been so far, seeing these new games and new systems coming out, full orchestral soundtracks, graphics you never thought possible, virtual reality. Things that seem to be in the future are now the present. I remember years and years ago, there was talk that the gaming industry might finally surpass the film industry. Well, that has reached and breached a long time ago. And pretty much everyone plays games these days. Even if you play games in a browser, a little game on the phone, you play games. And there's truly a game for everyone out there. So what is it about gaming that holds our attention? Well, I think for me in the early days it was just kind of the novelty of being able to control something that's on your TV. And the fantastic worlds and colours that this little system could put out. One of my favourite earlier games was this game, Brian Blood Axe. Really nice and colourful game, and it had a really extensive map, or it seemed an extensive map for the time. Use keys to open doors, and it was an adventure. Not even playing the game in some respects, just getting to screens you hadn't seen before. Seeing something new or solving a puzzle maybe. And this little game really did grab me back in the day. Perhaps more than some of the more simple games, shoot 'em ups or beat 'em ups, things like that. And I ended up putting hours and hours into this game. And that's kind of the subject of today's video. Games that really grabbed you, games that you spent maybe far more time in than you needed to. Maybe games that have some sort of ongoing situation, no real end to them, games that just keep you playing. We're going to look at some of the games that I played over the years, the ones that really grabbed me, and the one game that did become an addiction, and the game that I had to give up. And I know these days addiction is a term we kind of throw around fairly loosely, but I think in my case it was warranted. So let's begin. There's loads of different types of games out there, but what is it that makes a game addictive? Well, people play different games for different reasons. Things like the Championship Manager games, football management. I'm not a footballer myself, but hey, I completely understand it. Taking a team that you identify with and coaching them, yeah, I completely understand. A few of my friends were really big on Sensible Soccer back in the day. Sensible Soccer, was it Sensible World of Soccer on the Commodore Amiga, playing little tournaments among themselves and even going to playing game tournaments. These days with games like Oblivion, Morrowind, Skyrim, not to mention the latest Zelda game that I've just picked up and I've only put a few hours in so far, but really liking it so far. This is footage from Breath of the Wild. You can really understand how these massive worlds suck you into the game. You'll never manage to explore and find every last secret, every last little mission and everything there is to do. But this is the more modern side of things, so let's start from the beginning. The most iconic gaming system for me is always going to be the Sinclair ZX Spectrum. It's the first computer we ever had in our family. And it had some fantastic games on this little system, really nice and colourful, and what a great introduction to computing and gaming. I did have a 16K Sinclair ZX Spectrum myself, that was my personal first computer, but the family did have a 48K Spectrum that they upgraded. And some of those early games were based on arcade games, some of the more simple ones though. That's not to say this system didn't have its own share of crap games as well. This is Human Killing Machine, and I think this was intended to be a spin-off to Street Fighter. It didn't do very well. But here's Renegade. Now this is how you do a game on the Sinclair Spectrum. Really playable, great music and fantastic graphics. And this is a game I keep coming back to years and years later. I play it through fairly regularly. Really great game for the time. A really fun game to play, but you're not going to sit down and play it for hours and hours at a time. The Spectrum holds so many great gaming memories for me. It's absolute nostalgia, particularly the box art, picking a game up and just looking at the screenshots on the back. It takes you right back to being a kid. But the memory of the machine did always kind of keep you within its constraints. Games could only be so complex. And whilst Brian Blood Axe was a great game that I mentioned earlier, there was one other game that I do remember putting loads and loads of time into. This is Mercenary, and we looked at this in one of the earlier episodes. And the game looks so primitive by today's standards, but back in the day this was phenomenal to me. Being able to fly around, as well as pilot your vehicles, get out, even explore underground, go down lifts, different rooms, different objects, different vehicles. Unbelievable for the time. I spent hours on this one. I never did complete it, I spent most of my time walking around. but to me it showed how expansive games could become. But what about games on other systems? What a phenomenon Street Fighter 2 on the Super Nintendo was. It absolutely took over everything. Took over school, everyone was talking about it. People Hadouken in pencil cases at each other, Sonic Boom in shoes, Tiger uppercuts in the lunch line. Everyone was into this game. And there's some great two-player gaming memories of this one. Versus matches, pushing each other to do better, learning how your other players are going to react, beating the game on one credit, learning the special moves. And it's still a game that's got these addictive qualities to this very day. It wasn't all fair play though. We eventually had to come up with a rule of no trapping in corners, no cheap moves, no just continual throws, things like that. But it was kind of the game that wouldn't die. We just kept coming back to this game over and over. And it was a similar kind of thing for Mortal Kombat 2 on the Super Nintendo as well. A great game then, and I can still sit down and play this game for a couple of hours. Playing different characters, playing it all the way through, getting the best endings. Definitely a great game of our childhood. I think with the arrival of the Commodore Amiga, at least with me, was when games could become complex enough to become addictive. And Hunter, the game you're looking at now, is definitely true of that. Quite a few people tend to label this game as kind of one of the first Grand Theft Auto type games. I kind of think of it as Skyrim. It's a full open world with different vehicles and kind of like dungeons and different locations you can visit. And who knows how many days I spent racking up playing this game. Absolute masterpiece. When it comes to the Commodore Amiga and addictive games, I've got to include Frontier Elite 2. Back in around 1996, 1997, we were supposed to be studying for our exams at school. This was the first important exams in the UK. I didn't do any revision for these exams whatsoever. I was playing this game till 2 o'clock in the morning, getting up and going to school. It's a space trading game, but it's all about exploration. There's entire different planetary systems to explore, loads of places to trade with, loads of different vehicles. This game really grabbed me. I did work to improve my grades later on, so it wasn't all bad. And there was one final game on the Commodore Amiga that I've talked about before, and it's easily in my top 3 games of all time. Hired Guns for the Amiga was released in 1993, and the presentation of this game was the first thing that struck me. Buy a game these days, it might not even have instructions. This had multiple booklets, backstories for every single character, documentation of some of the items you'll pick up, and that introduced you to a pretty much perfect game. It's a Dungeon Master style game, but with guns. Guns, puzzles, and 4 players at the same time. And I was absolutely obsessed with this game. As soon as I got the demo, I was playing the demo for months until we got the full game. It just seems so amazing to see such a complex game on the Commodore Amiga. And I can't even begin to think of the hundreds of hours that I've put into this game over the years. Every time I play it, I find something new. It's got the usual tropes about finding keys to open doors to progress, but it's got extra weapons, things you can pick up. You've got a device where you can build bridges to get to inaccessible areas. Loads of different weapons that you don't start out with. There's just so much to this game. I used to love exploring every single inch of a level. If I found a locked door on a level, it would drive me absolutely nuts. I would cover every inch of the level trying to find a key. I would truly love a remake of this game, and it absolutely is one of my desert island games. Another game that I willingly gave away hundreds and hundreds of hours to was Shining the Holy Ark on the Sega Saturn. And if you pick up one game for this system, just let it be this one. It's pretty much a perfect RPG game in my opinion. Dungeon crawling, a little in the same style as Hired Guns we've just seen, but it is single player, but you control 4 characters. And this game has got an absolutely fantastic soundtrack, not to mention the visuals and a great backstory. I've been through this game multiple times over the years, probably sort of 40 to 60 hours each time, and I think I've pretty much got every single discoverable item in the entire game by now. An absolute masterpiece. This is one game I never want to be without, so I've got 3 copies of this game, just like I got 3 copies of Hired Guns as well. It's hard to overstate the impact that Final Fantasy VII had when it was released on the Sony PlayStation back in 1997. And if you played this game back in the day, then you already know. We'd never seen anything like this before, a story so rich, so detailed, and there's no getting around it. You do lose one of the main characters in this game, and It had just never been handled that way before. Full motion video, this character that you've been playing along with for maybe 20 hours, to lose one of the main characters, you just could not believe it at the time. There was no bringing this character back. And I'm sorry to break it to you, but if you haven't played this game by now, you're probably not going to play it. But what an incredible game. Not only did this thing come released on 3 CDs back in the day, it was just absolutely vast. There was a whole world to explore, and kind of side missions and stuff you could do as well, not to mention a fantastic combat system. And this is going to be in the hundreds and hundreds of hours, this one. Multiple playthroughs over the years, Sony PlayStation, Nintendo Switch, PC, and even now I'm watching playthroughs on YouTube, people finding things after all these years, different materia combinations to affect enemies in different ways, glitches, speedrunning this game, it's got everything. And even when you complete the game, you can still come back and discover new things, grind out levels and pick up new weapons and discover other side stories. The game's also got hidden characters, and you're not even required to find these on your playthrough, so I think the first time I played this game all the way through, I didn't even find one of them. This game absolutely rewards exploration. And if you ever played this game enough back in the day to get the Knights of the Round materia you're seeing here, you just felt absolutely untouchable. 12 multiple attacks of 9,999 would pretty much kill everything in the game. Well, almost. I've spoken to a few people over the years who've tried to get into this game, but they just don't really get it. I would just say give it a chance, give it a couple of hours, and this game will absolutely grab you. One of the game's major strengths is that combat system. You can pretty much play the game all the way through and not really pay that much attention to it, and you'll still beat the game, but once you learn of the complexities and the way you can combine other items, it's just so addictive. And there's that fantastic battle with Sephiroth at the end of the game as well. What a great fight this was, seeing this the first time. Starting out, you seem to be doing fairly well, doing some damage, but then Sephiroth's got an answer to your Knights of the Round materia. He hits you with Supernova. Now I've sped this up about 8 times. When this happened back in the day, you knew you were really in trouble. Thankfully it only does percentage based damage. I think it takes something like 96% of your life away, so it never really kills you, but it always makes you worried that first time it happens. You'll never forget it. The remake of this game's getting some absolutely fantastic feedback. I have bought the game myself, but I haven't really started it yet, so it's one of those ones I'll get round to, and if it's anything like the experiences I'm hearing from other people, then it's going to be absolutely fantastic. We also got lucky with this game. In the original Japanese version, you didn't have some of the extra super bosses that you do in the UK and I think the American release as well. I remember trying over and over again, trying to beat Ruby Weapon back in the day you're seeing here. Even at your absolutely maxed out top level, you haven't got a chance unless you know how to do the fight. But it's a completely optional side quest. So we've looked at several different games so far, ones that I put hundreds and hundreds of hours into, but this doesn't even come close to the main game we're looking at today. And this starts round about 2001, 2002. So back then I just started college, and a couple of my friends were really into computers and gaming as well. One of my friends, Ben, was really into Counter-Strike, so much so that I don't think he actually finished his second year of the course I was doing. I think he just dropped out and started playing Counter-Strike all day, pretty much every day. I was probably playing this game, Battlefield 1942, Quake 3, Unreal Tournament, Deus Ex, a few other games kinda like that. But one day, and I remember this really clearly, my other friend Dave came into class one day and he looked terrible, he looked like shit. So I thought, what's up with you, mate? Why do you look so tired? And he said, oh, I was up all night raiding. Up all night raiding? Raiding what? Raiding a bank? Raiding a cookie jar? Raiding a village? What was this? He'd got sucked into a game called EverQuest, and it took a little bit of persuasion for him to show me this game, but eventually he did, and it looked really interesting to me. Now at the time I was playing these games, I was also looking at chat rooms and stuff on the internet. Believe it or not, it was a big thing back then. And one of them I was playing was kind of a 3D chat room, and you chose an avatar and you could walk around, and to me this kind of seemed like an expansion on that. Back then, internet access in the UK was not what it is now, so we had to make do with a dial-up modem. I don't think there was any cable around at the time. And my friend Dave, who was really into this, had a kind of nice little workaround back in the day. BT supplied the dial-up service and also the phone service, but with the phone service you could set a preferred number where you could dial it for an hour without charge. So he set the dial-up modem number as one of the preferred numbers, so he could play not quite for free but not far off. So he had a little stopwatch next to his desk, and it was set for 58 minutes. After 58 minutes he would disconnect from his game, log on again and get a whole new hour. Yep, those were some of the sacrifices we had to make. But whilst I thought the game looked really interesting, I was kind of turned off when I heard it had a monthly fee to pay. It was only something like £10 or so, but I was at college at the time. I did have a part-time job, and I was probably earning, I don't know, 4 hours on a Saturday, £15 or something a day. And being young, I'd rather spend that money on beer and going out with my friends on a Saturday night. So I never actually ended up playing EverQuest back in the day. But in 2005, I heard a sequel was coming, and I wanted to get on that game as early as possible. I had a full-time job by now, so paying £10 extra a month wasn't really a big problem. So let's open a brand new sealed copy of the game that I bought for £2 off eBay and see what I was dealing with back in the day. Now, as this game is completely online and downloadable, these CDs don't really do anything anymore. They don't actually connect to the servers that were there when the game launched, so it's largely useless. But it does have some extras on the disc that let us see how things were back then. There's a few videos on the disc showing us some of the voice actors. You've got Christopher Lee, who played Saruman in Lord of the Rings, playing the evil Lord Lucan. And you've got Heather Graham, still one of the most beautiful women in the world in my opinion, playing Queen Antonia Bale of the good city of Kynos. But enough of all this, how long have I played this game? This episode is all about gaming addiction. Well, I don't even have to guess. The game itself has a command called played, and it shows you when your character was created and how long you have logged in for. Let's take a look. Yep, you're reading that correctly. 426 days, 9 hours and 49 minutes. Or 1 year and 61 days. That is what a gaming addiction looks like. So that does seem like an absolutely massive amount of time, and there's no getting away from it. It absolutely is. Imagine what you could do with all that time. But I spent all that time doing something I enjoy, so is that time wasted? I don't know. If you watch loads of football, if you watch loads of Netflix, watch loads of TV, you probably enjoy doing that as well. But even so, you've probably not come close to that amount of time. But what is it about this game? How did it get its hooks into me? Well, this is a massively multiplayer online role-playing game, or MMORPG. And all the other games I played up until this point were kind of against each other. You were playing deathmatch games maybe, or maybe team deathmatches, the idea taking the other team out. But this game was different. This is all about cooperation, cooperating with other players, joining groups to take down enemies and complete quests. So it was a lot more social, a lot more chatting, a lot more speaking, voice chat, that kind of stuff. It was a whole new type of game to me. So like a lot of games of this type, there's kind of 4 main classes. There's a fighter class who can attack enemies and keep the focus on them, so they take all the damage and the weaker classes don't. There's healers that heal you. There's damage classes that do lots of damage but are fairly weak. And there's usually one other kind of support class that deals with healing your mana and crowd control, things like that. So you don't get too many enemies attacking you at once. But I was all about the damage. I was going to choose a sorcerer in this game. And they can eventually become a wizard or a warlock. So I think this is the first screenshot I ever took in this game, way back in 2006 maybe. And the game was a little rough on release. It didn't run particularly well, and to be honest it doesn't really run that well these days anyway. And with some of the enemies there wasn't any sort of leashing, so it didn't really matter what you were attacking. You can get fish that chase you over land, they didn't sort of leash back to the water, things like that. That did eventually get fixed, and they carried over something from the first game, which was spirit shards. If you died, you left a spirit shard in the world, and until you revisited the area in which you died, you were significantly weaker. So you could lose up to, I think it was 5 spirit shards in the world, so you were half as effective as you were before. And this is a feature that got taken out of the game. I do understand it though. I remember back in the day playing this game, running around the dungeon of Stormhold, running away from enemies, and I kept dying over and over again, and I eventually ran down this well, and I think I lost all my spirit shards at the bottom, and there was no way of getting them. No way of getting them back in the day, unless you had a full group to go down there with you. I think I had to petition, and one of the game masters recovered my spirit shards for me so I could actually play again. You do get them back after something like 2 hours of waiting for each shard, so it is a long time. But you can kind of see why they did away with it. But for me, the game's main strength was in grouping together with other players, fighting enemies and getting good loot. Getting upgrades for your characters that will let you take on even tougher enemies. And what you really wanted in this game was raids. Now you had to gear up through groups to get good enough gear to play in raids, but this was different. Rather than 6 players playing together, it was up to 24 players, 4 different groups all at the same time, all trying to take out really tough enemies. Some of the fights were incredibly tough and lots of coordination involved, but the rewards, that's where you got the best gear.
If you have your miracles or 30,000 damage or whatever used now, I will be able to have rescue.
Kill the dragon! Get it!
Get it down.
Yeah, that was a huge blast. We're in that. You need it. Yeah, that caused problems though.
Crap.
So taking a wipe is all part of this game. You will die over and over, especially when you're taking on tough stuff for the first time. The group you're playing in will wipe, or the raid you're playing in will wipe, and you'll kind of talk amongst yourselves. What could you have done differently? What could you have done better? What different strategies? Do you need more healing? Do you need more damaging? Has the fight got some sort of mechanic where you need to avoid tail lash or something like that, or a frontal attack? And it's only when you spend hours and hours with 23 other people just throwing yourselves at these enemies over and over again, trying different things, and that moment when you finally crack it, it just makes it all worthwhile. By the time the game's 3rd expansion came out, I wanted to give myself another challenge with this game. I wanted to start a new character, but I didn't want to start it on the same account. I wanted to kind of play 2 characters at the same time. So I put together another PC, I bought another copy of the game, I bought the latest expansion pack, and I started over. And this was kind of a whole new way to play, not just playing with different groups, but just challenging yourself. 2 players at the same time, what can you take down in this game? Well, when I started out, I had my Warlock already, but I also chose a Illusionist or Coercer. Now they can handle crowd control, they can stop enemies moving, that kind of thing. And that's really handy if you're a light cloth wearing class and you're going to get hit about and die a lot. So when I started out playing 2 players at the same time, or 2 boxing as it's known, it is a bit tricky to get the hang of to start with. And maybe I didn't choose the best second character for this, but this was basically what it was. Taking on enemies that are fit for a group of 6 and just taking them on with my 2. So basically I would do some damage, and as soon as the damage hits I would use my Illusionist to freeze the character in place. And as long as you did no more damage, that was fine. You could just rest up for a sec. Do another load of damage, and as soon as it hits, freeze them again. Rinse and repeat and you can get some good loot. It could be really slow though, but there were some good rewards as well. One day when I was playing the game though, I grouped with another player. He wanted to form a group so we could go off and complete quests, and he was playing a healer. He played a Defiler, basically an evil healer. But Defilers have wards, and they're basically like shields that stop you taking damage in the first place. And me and this guy, I think we went all over this whole zone that was designed for 6 people, and we were tearing the place up. I was absolutely set. I want my second character to be a Defiler as well. And that's what I set up. I leveled up an entirely new character again, and played Defiler as well as Warlock. And that worked just perfect for me. The amount of extra stuff I could take down, definitely the right decision. Even old raid zones from a last expansion, or maybe the one before, I could pretty much do them now with 2 characters. And that's what it was about. It was the kind of the challenge of it. 2 players at the same time, taking down old enemies, getting the loot and stuff. Alright, the loot wasn't that much useful anymore, but just to do it, just to get the achievement, absolutely addictive. I didn't give up on grouping with other players though. That is still where the game was for me. And when you got into a good group, you really knew it. Especially if you had a group that kind of complemented each other with different abilities and they had really good gear. If they had really good gear, you could basically run through the zone, pull absolutely everything and just burn it down. I think the poor old computer was just trying to cope with the amount of numbers calculating on screen at the time. So things got a bit choppy, but a lot of fun. I think around this time though was probably when things started to get a bit crazy. I think I joined a guild that were mainly based in America. I'm in the UK, so they played at different times. Which meant I had to play at different times if I wanted to play these raids. So I'd be up till 4 o'clock in the morning, or someone would even send me a message whilst I was in bed saying, "Hey, log on, we need you." Okay. And it's just nuts now, thinking back about those times, how crazy things were. And you could also sell stuff in this game. You could sell stuff to get cash to buy other things in the game. And occasionally, whilst I was at work, at lunch, I would remote on to my home PC and update and sell stuff remotely. So I was pretty much thinking of this game all the time. And you end up spending loads of time with these people, these guild mates, these group mates. You know, you end up knowing them really well. So I'm kind of glad I retained all these videos and pictures from over the years. It really does take you back to the day. I remember when we defeated this guy for the first time. Here you can basically just mess around with him because you're too high level, but the first time we beat this guy, it was awesome. We'd probably been trying on and off a month to get this guy down. Every week we'd rejoin the group, rejoin a raid, and we'd have another crack at it. And one day we finally got it.
Excellent work. Wham that dragon.
One thing with these massively multiplayer online role-playing games is they're kind of a point in time. You'll never have the same feeling taking this guy down again. It's never just like a single player game. The first time you took this guy down, 23 of you, all of you celebrating together because you've all helped, you've all done your bit. But now you've out-leveled these zones? They're just empty. So this game actually formed quite a large part of my life. A whole year, over a year of playing this game. And in some ways I actually count myself kinda lucky. Games these days, including this game and other MMORPG games, they've all been hit by monetization and shortcuts. And I know that's the nature of the beast these days, but I kinda count myself lucky for playing this game at a time when they weren't in. It was just about how well you could work together, defeat bosses, get gear to get onto new challenges. These days the takeover of monetization has really cheapened the gameplay experience, and I don't think any MMOs are going to come out ever again that aren't going to have monetization. And in a game like this, that really matters. I don't even see that many MMO games coming out these days. I get the impression that developers don't really want to take the chance on them. Yeah, there's ongoing costs with the server backend, expansions and things like that, but these days I get the impression developers would rather just release another first-person shooter with microtransactions. Or yet another zombie survival game, because we all need more of those. But I'll never forget my time playing this game. I know some people might look at this video and think, isn't that a load of wasted time? And I disagree. Any time that you spend having fun is not time wasted. And this game was so much fun to me. And I am barely playing the game these days. I probably log in, I don't know, an hour a fortnight, probably not even that, just to walk around and just look at old times, old locations. And this is the only MMO game I'm ever going to play. This one only. And I'm going to be here right until the end. When this game sunsets, when the last server is turned off, I want to be there. Not because of what the game is, but because of what it once was. So I hope you enjoyed that little run through this game. That was my experience with most addictive games. But what was yours? It might not even be an MMO at all, it might be a completely different type of game. It doesn't matter how long you've played it, just one game that really grabbed you. The most addictive game you've played. What was it? Let me know in the comments. I'm sure down the line I'll be putting in some more videos of this game. There's so much to cover with this game, and there's no way I could do it justice in just a single video. But But take it easy for now, and I'll see you next time.